Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to our Conscious Cafe global event tonight. And we have a lovely evening, which doesn't exclude men, but it's a women's health evening, refuel and re-energize for a longer life. And I can't be the only one here who wants to live a longer life and live well. That's the aim here. And that's what our expert speaker is going to talk about tonight. Talking about midlife and beyond, and living, having the energy that we need. She's going to talk about a midlife refuel, getting into good nutritional shape and managing hormones naturally. So welcome Maryon Stewart, who is our speaker tonight. Maryon is based in Florida. I think, Maryon, are you based there some of the time and some in the UK and just...
Yes, I normally come and go and try and get to as many Conscious Cafe events as I can. But when COVID hit, I was in Florida and I decided I'd stay here. And I'm actually quite pleased I made that decision.
So, well, welcome tonight. And just to say a little bit about Maryon. Maryon is a leading global expert in advising women about their health. She has a thriving consultancy practice. She's done a lot of broadcasting. She's the author of 20 books, including several bestsellers. She writes regularly for a number of publications, including the Daily Mail. She's been a real pioneer in natural menopause, and that is her latest book, which she's going to talk about tonight. She's done a lot of charity and campaigning work and has received the British Empire Medal for her services for drug education. And she runs an online club and a lot of courses, and I'm sure we're going to hear about those tonight. So let's give a nice warm welcome to Maryon Stewart. Well, welcome, Maryon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. Special Judy knows that she has a very special place in my heart, and so does Conscious Cafe. And I'm so happy to share my wisdom to, if nothing else, just give you hope that wherever you are on your journey, if you're not feeling 100% brilliant, that you can do a U-turn and reclaim your well-being and feel better than you can remember. Because as women, if you're anything like me, you probably have been bottom of your priority list and done everything for everybody else. And it's not until you fall over or feel a bit old and creaky that you start thinking, I better do something now. But mostly you don't really understand what's going on in your body. And so the purpose of my talk tonight is to give you great insight as to what's happening, no matter where you are, whether you're younger or older. It really is the very similar common denominators to well-being. So I'm going to share my screen, and I've got a PowerPoint presentation. So the first part of this is going to be the presentation, and you can put any questions you like into the chat box, which Gina will be watching out for. And then we're going to do some breakout, and there'll be some Q&A so I can answer your questions as well. So hopefully we'll have satisfied all your questions by the time we finish. We'll see how we go. Okay, so here I'm going to go with...
Maryon, can I just make the distinction that if people want to comment, and they're very free to do that, put comments in, but if they're asking a question, to put a Q there, and then I know that's a specific question, because we like to have comments and feedback, but to stick that Q in if they've got a question for you.
Okay, fantastic. So for some reason, let's see why, there you go. So everybody should be able to see my screen now. If you can't, then if you can put something in the chat, and then Gina will try and help you. Okay, so this is about having happy hormones and happy everything else in your body. And as Gina said, I've been around the block and done all sorts of things, including publishing a book with Piatkas, which is how I met Judy. And my new book is actually my 28th book, amazingly, but it's my first American book, so it's very special. And again, Judy had a part in that. So I'm very grateful to be able to enlighten her close friends. So I'm going to go through all the different life stages just to whiz through, because I don't know how old all of you are. You're welcome to put it in the chat if you want to. But whether you're still suffering with PMS, whether you went into an early menopause because of surgery or just bad luck, sometimes if your mum goes into an early menopause, you follow her. Perimenopause, which is the 8 years leading up to menopause. Menopause itself, which is just one day, believe it or not. It's the anniversary of your last period. And then from that day onwards, you're postmenopausal. And so this is really about not just overcoming symptoms, but also future-proofing your health so that you prevent things like osteoporosis, heart disease, dementia, diabetes, putting weight on around the middle, and all those things that befall us when we get to menopause. So let's just take a dive as to what's going on, and a little bit more on these stages. If you've had PMS, you'll know that it makes you feel irritable, moody, anxious sometimes, and very tired, and often you have quite considerable cravings. They don't just go away, because when you go into menopause or perimenopause, they come with you and they last for more days very often, and it can feel like you've got PMS most days of the week. Early menopause, as I said, can come about because of surgery or just because you have a family history of that. And it may just feel like you're not really thinking that you're going through the menopause, but maybe you feel that you've got PMS for more days a month. You're starting to wonder if it's hot in here or is it me, and to suddenly find that you're flatlining a bit, you can't experience the joy that you normally do, and you're starting to feel it's harder to sleep maybe, and you may be a bit achy. So they're the common symptoms, and you'll get those kind of symptoms going through perimenopause. Perimenopause, you can still have periods, but your periods may be irregular for the first time in your life, and maybe you keep bursting out into tears and you don't understand why. Some women have panic attacks and palpitations, they think they're having a heart attack, and others get headaches, they get hot usually. And our surveys show that well, probably the most recent survey shows that 70% of women experience a feeling of being switched off below the waist, which affects their libido, and they get vaginal dryness. So it's all of those things that we're talking about and more, because there are more symptoms than that, as you'll see in a minute. Menopause, as I said, it's just 1 year, happy birthday, no period, and that's your menopause. And by that time, usually women are suffering with low libido and brain fog. So they can't really remember what they were saying mid-sentence. They maybe can't remember someone's name that they know really well. And it can be pretty depressing. And the worst thing is that most women, according to our surveys, and we have surveyed thousands and thousands of women, feel that menopause is the end of life as they knew it. And they don't really realize, because no one tells them. And we are born without a manual, so nobody tells us that we can really get ourselves into good shape. We can have what I call a midlife refuel. So next is post-menopause, which comes the day after menopause, and that's for the rest of your life. And you can have aches and pains, low libido, brain fog, vaginal dryness, depression. You can have all the symptoms we've talked about won't necessarily go. And in fact, I was in the foyer of Menopause the Musical in Australia, which is an amazing show. If anyone hasn't seen it and they ever get a chance, go and see it, because it's very funny. And I was listening to the women going past me having conversations, and I could hear them saying, been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. And I was thinking to myself, well, actually you haven't, because you don't realize that when your ovaries are no longer working and you've got low levels of nutrients, you're a sitting duck and you're much more prone to problems. Your symptoms can continue. I've had patients in their 70s, well into their 70s, they're still having hot flushes and vaginal dryness and aches and pains and so on. And it's really, it's not going to go away suddenly unless you learn to meet your needs. Think about the fact that 100 years or so ago, we weren't living much past 50, so it didn't really matter. But now when 40 something represents halfway for so many of us, we've got all these amazing extra years, and we are so wise, as we know, in Conscious Cafe, and we're full of purpose, and we've got so many wonderful things and gifts to bring to the world. But if we're curled up in a ball feeling terrible, or falling over having osteoporosis and heart disease, or worse still, dementia, then we're not going to be used to anybody, least of all ourselves. And so that's why it's really important when you get to the fork in the road to try and learn how to meet your needs so that you can feel better. So this is the list of menopause symptoms. And as I said, they don't necessarily go away after your menopause. So some women get stress incontinence, so they stop peeing if they sneeze or laugh. Some people can't manage to even go for a walk for an hour without needing to pee, and that can be, it just makes you feel like an old lady. And so those things come about usually because when you've got low levels of estrogen, the cells, the factory that produced all the lovely cells that kept your tissues in great shape, pretty much goes out of business. The lights switch off. And so unless you know how to meet your needs, you're going downhill. If you learn how to have the refuel, as I'm going to explain, then eventually you can get the things like vaginal dryness to reverse. If your bladder and urethra aren't playing ball, then you can help those as well, so that you can actually hold on to the urine for much longer. And things like brain fog and all of those symptoms disappear. So you can feel much younger. And also the research shows that you can also, by consuming Mother Nature's estrogen, you can reduce the depths of wrinkles on your face if you're bothered by those, which I call wisdom stripes, by, well, quite significantly within the space of 12 weeks. And very often people on our programs say that people come up to them asking them what they've done, because they look so much better. Their hair starts shining, their nails are growing, their eyes are glowing again, and they feel like they've had someone's breathed life back into them. And that's because they've been in what I call economy mode. When you're running on empty, you're just firing on 2 cylinders instead of 4. And it's really impossible to feel good. So that's why you get the flushes. That's why it's hard to sleep. You get achy and maybe feel 90 before your time. And some women don't want to be touched. Not only have they not got any sensations, it becomes painful and feeling anxious and lacking concentration, feeling scared and isolated, a bit like one of the pods in the London Eye. And some women, about 20% of women, don't get any symptoms at all. So they're the lucky ones. But they still have to look after their nutritional health if they want to be in good shape in the long term. So it's important to learn how to do that. And even if you're taking hormone replacement therapy, that's not going to correct nutritional deficiencies either. So you can run the 2 things together. So first of all, let's have a look at diet and how that affects our hormones and our mental well-being, for that matter. So Mother Nature, in her wisdom, gives us these wonderful signs of vitamin and mineral deficiency. And we can detect those if we know how to communicate with what our body is trying to tell us. But most of us don't speak body speak. And so when we see things like cracking at the side of our mouth, red greasy patches at the side of our nose, dry skin, maybe spotty skin, pimples on your upper arms and thighs, your hair's not very lush anymore, it's not shiny, it's maybe getting thin and falling out, and your nails are cracked and breaking. All of those things mean something in terms of nutritional deficiencies. And it's a question of how do you detect those so that you can correct them. And there is, at the end, I'm going to give you a link to a download, which is our nutritional evaluation tool. And I'll make sure Gina has got that so that she can get that sent out to everyone, so that you can read a bit more about this and you can detect your own nutritional deficiencies. So we're going to touch on a few things first of all. So this one's iron. So some of these slides are not very pretty. But iron deficiency, you can get sore tongue and ulcers on your tongue, cracking at the side of your mouth, as I said, and your hair can fall out and you look very thin, a bit like the balding that men experience. And that can be related to iron, and split nails as well, ridgy nails, cracked nails, all of those things. So you can also feel tired and short of breath. So you may notice when you're going up the stairs, you're feeling much more stretched than usual, palpitations, more prone to things like thrush, and your concentration goes out the window. And there are plenty of iron-rich foods. If you're a meat eater, then the red meat is iron-rich, liver, and any other red meat. And if not, there's plenty of vegetarian sources. So you just need to tuck into those, and you can even have fortified cereals if you want to, but just make sure you've got plenty of iron-rich foods. Dry skin, which again, many of us experience as we get older, is usually associated with things like essential fats in our body and vitamin A and vitamin E, as well as the falling levels of estrogen. So we can, again, consume foods that are rich in essential fats, whether they're from oily fish or nuts and seeds, fortified foods, there's plenty of foods that are rich in those nutrients. And again, for thinning hair, looking at correcting iron deficiency, and also vitamin C is another interesting thing. There are some supplements also for hair thinning. But again, looking at adding the vitamin C to the iron-rich things, so they're the berries and the citrus fruits, and they're the main sources, but there are other sources as well. And then the rough, pimply skin on your upper arms and thighs, you may not have noticed those, but if you can feel your upper arms or your thighs and see if you've got any bobbly little lumps, because that's usually a sign of essential fatty acid deficiency and other vitamins and minerals as well, and can be reversed. So it's just another sign. Again, oily fish, and if not, plenty of nuts and seeds, and maybe taking some supplements. There are fish oil supplements, but there are also essential fatty acid supplements that are vegetarian if you are. And as I mentioned at the beginning, so wrinkles come about as a process of aging, but they're made worse if you've got low levels of vitamin A, C, and E, and the minerals selenium and zinc, and also if you've got low levels of estrogen, and that tends to ensure that your levels of collagen decline. So all of those things, again, having the wholesome foods, plenty of isoflavones, and I'll come on to that, the naturally occurring estrogen, plenty of good protein, and all of those things help to, excuse me, redress the deficiency. And poor vision at night, a lot of us think that it's just old age that's making us not see too well when we're driving along at night. Some people stop driving at night because they can't see so well. But if you make sure your vitamin A and zinc are in good shape, then the chances are you will see better at night. And some of those things that I've been talking about, vitamin C and zinc, for example, even vitamin A and vitamin D, are all necessary to boost immunity. So, and it's a good idea to be taking some of these things during the pandemic because it helps us to stay in a better place. So again, poor vision at night, you're looking at having foods rich in those important nutrients. And then fatigue, which is something again that's very common, and making sure we did 5 separate studies on women of childbearing age, and we found that between 50 to 80% of them had low levels of magnesium. And magnesium was the most common deficiency. And there've now been studies, really big studies done around the world showing literally billions of women have low levels of nutrients, much more so than men. And that really can change the color of the lenses through which you see the world. So sometimes people get depressed and moody and anxious and panicky, and all of those symptoms can relate to nutritional deficiencies. So when you have your refuel, suddenly your mood becomes much more buoyant and your whole demeanor does too. And things like fatigue and aches and pains all disappear. So marine fish oil again, or evening primrose oil, is good, as well as the important vitamins and minerals. And you'll see a common thread running through here, where it's the wholesome foods and the oils that are really important to us. So we're focusing on people that come for help. We're normally looking at making sure they've got a diet rich in iron, B vitamins, vitamin D and E, magnesium, zinc and calcium, as well as essential fatty acids. But then there are what I call the nutrient robbers. So when you're in this really delicate state and we're trying to get your nutrients back into an optimum range, there are certain foods and drinks that contain things called phytates that lock onto nutrients. So particularly red wine and tannin in tea lock onto nutrients like calcium, magnesium, iron and zinc and stop them from being properly absorbed. So I usually ask people to go on a modified exclusion diet just for a little while to get the nutrients through. It takes probably altogether about 11 weeks or so to get your nutrients back into an optimum range. And the reason I know that is that I was writing a book and we were looking at either my ex-husband or I going on the national average consumption of junk food to see how quickly we could get nutritionally deficient. And I was breastfeeding our second baby, so he got the short straw. And he used to have tons of energy and be very amenable and had good libido. But by the time he got 8 weeks into this experiment, and he was trying to eat healthy food as well, he was like a grouchy old bear falling asleep, and his 2 o'clock patient came in and found him asleep on his waiting room sofa with a can of cola in his hand, which wasn't a great look for a nutritional physician. And when we aborted the experiment, as we did, we found that 2 of his nutrients, because they'd all been in a good range to start with, 2 of them had actually become deficient even in 8 weeks, and it took 11 weeks to get them back into an optimum range. So it is important to understand it's not magic. You just need to work at it to get yourself back into really good shape. But when you do get your nutrients into good range, you can expect the brain fog to go. You can expect things like aches and pains to disappear, that you get miraculously much more energy instead of being tired. You're sleeping much better. Some of the women on our program go from waking up 7 times in the night to sleeping all night, or maybe just getting up once to pee, and then feeling so much calmer, no panic attacks and palpitations, and libido comes back eventually as well, and the vagina heals. So as I said, you've got this, it's like a fork in the road when you get to this stage in life, and you're going to take one of 2 routes, either to do nothing, and then you obviously weather the, not just the aging process, but also you're at risk for all those things I mentioned, like bone thinning and more heart disease than men, because before menopause, women have got far less heart disease than men, but after menopause, unless you do something about it, it goes the other way. And also dementia, which is obviously a very scary disease. So getting our hormones back into balance, let's talk now about Mother Nature's estrogen, because that's the other part of this, the other bit of the diet. When you go through menopause, well, let's go back a bit. When you're born as a baby girl, you've got millions of eggs, literally. And those eggs are dropping as you have each cycle, menstrual cycle in your life. And then when you get to about 35, it all reaches a peak and it's downhill onwards. When you get to perimenopause and menopause, the ovaries are stopping working. So eventually you have no eggs left. Now, as I said, we weren't living much past 50, 100 years or so ago. And so it didn't matter. But now, when you've got empty estrogen receptor sites in the cells, the brain doesn't get it. And in order to try and get your ovaries working again, it tries to kickstart the ovaries back into function. And so these naturally occurring estrogens, so phyto just means plant, but they're Mother Nature's gift to us because we can access them from plant foods, and they have a very similar structure to the estradiol that you have in your body before menopause. And so they mimic estrogen. And they also compete successfully against the nasty environmental estrogens known as xenoestrogens, which come from pesticides, pollution, and toxic waste. And if you've got empty estrogen receptor sites, your brain really wants you to have any old estrogen. So those harmful estrogens, which can cause a dramatic increase in breast cancer, can get into the receptor sites and cause havoc. So satisfying the needs of the estrogen receptor sites at this stage in your life is not just a nice idea. It's really important if you want to stay healthy. And it helps to moderate estrogen levels in your body. So this nice little cartoon, which was done by a guy who became Cartoonist of the year after he did my cartoons, lucky me, just shows that as the naturally occurring estrogen gets into the receptor site, it seals off the space so none of the harmful estrogen can get back in there. And that's what you get this happening. So the research shows it protects us also from hormonally related cancers. So if you think about Asian communities, they have a far less incidence of not just hot flushes. In fact, in Japanese, they didn't have a term for hot flush until they started to consume a Western diet. But they also have half the incidence of estrogen-dependent cancer, and they have half the incidence of bone-thinning disease, osteoporosis, and heart disease as well. So this is the slide I was referring to before. It's not exactly the same if you did spot the difference, but it's very similar to the isoflavone to estradiol. So you can see how you can fool your brain into thinking normal circulating estrogen has come. For some reason, I've got 3 green lines on my screen. I don't know how I managed to do that or how to get them off. So I'm sorry if If you can see those, you may just have to bear with me. So Mother Nature's estrogen is essentially a natural alternative to hormone replacement therapy. And it helps us to get through this next phase in our life and to keep ourselves in good shape. It also helps when you're satisfying the needs of the estrogen receptor sites with Mother Nature's estrogen. You're going to fool the brain into thinking you've got normal circulating estrogen. And so the factory lights go back on again, and the cells that have been making new bone cells every month go back into production, whereas they were dropping off. So before menopause, you were making about 3% new bone mass every year, and you were losing about 3%. So you're staying in even balance. But when you get to menopause, you can lose up to 10% of your bone mass in a year, and you're not necessarily making any new bone. But when you fool your brain into thinking you've got normal circulating estrogen, then you can expect that new bone cells will be made in the same way that you can expect to be protected from heart disease and dementia. So, and also the environmental estrogen. So that's really good. So the power of these amazing phytoestrogens is that they help to regulate the menstrual cycle. So if any of you still got a regular cycle and you're a bit irregular, then that can help. It helps to prevent the estrogen-dependent cancers, including breast cancer, even prostate cancer in men. So it doesn't matter if you share your meals with a male. It's not going to cause him to grow breasts, as people often ask me, does this have an adverse effect on men? But it helps the research. There was a great study done many years ago at Guy's in London showing that it improves short and long-term memory and cognitive function. And there's been plenty of other studies done since then to show that you can restore your memory. And also it shuts off the blood supply to growing growths like fibroids and cysts and endometriosis, and helps to prevent diabetes. So lots of good reasons to consume those. Now, isoflavones come in a few key foods. They do come in a few other foods, but not to a great degree. So I thought it'd be interesting to just share how many isoflavones you've got per serving of these foods. So soy is a good source, and you can get that from soy milk, and you can get it from soy yogurt, edamame beans, and tofu, miso, that kind of thing. So you can find, if you really don't like soy much, you can just try having some edamame beans in your salad. You can disguise soya milk in a fruit shake, which you can make in the blender. And it doesn't, there's, in my new book, there's tons of recipes and fast options and shopping lists and things like that, if you want to know how to include these. So edamame beans are a great source. And as I said, there's some recipes for things that you can whip up or bake to get some extra. And there are 4 different types of isoflavones. So I try and get in the program, I'm trying to include all of them. So not putting all our eggs in one basket. In soy, you've got what's called genistein and daidzein. And in red clover, which you can only get in pill form, you've got 2 others called biocanin A and formanotin. And then in the flax seeds, the lovely flax seeds, which help to keep your skin and your hair and your nails in good shape. Also, if you're constipated, they're amazing for your gut. They're also a rich source of lignans. So that's the other one. And to a lesser extent, you've got some phytoestrogens in things like chickpeas, mung beans, other nuts and seeds, rhubarb, celery, fennel. You can't really count those in. You're ideally looking to have, if you're going through something, you're looking to have about 100 milligrams of isoflavones a day. And if you're preventing something, because you don't have any particular symptoms, so let's say you wanted to prevent osteoporosis, which runs in your family, you need 50 milligrams of isoflavones a day. And if you are actually addressing something, you need about 100 milligrams a day. And you ideally want to have them little and often throughout the day, because the estrogen receptor sites don't stay full for very long. So now looking at different things you can have. You can simply have a fruit shake for breakfast, or you could have a cereal that contains some flax seeds, and ideally a couple of tablespoons of flax seeds or ground flax seeds, and lots of fruit, maybe some vitamin C rich berries, and then you can have some soy milk or soy yogurt with that. You can have other breakfasts as well, but they're just kind of typical things that will give you isoflavones. And again, here you've got some edamame beans. You can put those on a salad. You could use tofu and mix it with eggs to scramble something up and put it on toast. You can put soy milk in soup. You can have all sorts of different combinations. And then dinner, you can either leave your dinner as it is, because you may not need extra isoflavones around dinner time, or if you wanted to experiment, you could take some textured vegetarian protein and mix it with some mince if you eat meat, and have half and half and fool your family into thinking it's normal spaghetti bolognese. You can get marinated tofu pieces made by Cauldron Foods in the fridge section in the supermarket, and that takes on the flavor of your stir fry. Or you can just have an ordinary dinner and maybe have, if you need extra isoflavones, you can have a soy yogurt afterwards, or a whipped dessert if you're into that kind of thing. Or you can just take a red clover pill later on in the day. And there are plenty of drinks, so you can either have soy milk by itself, and there are different sorts as well. Some taste better than others, so it's just, and some have got more calories in than others, so it just depends. The low calorie ones, the light ones, usually contain half the isoflavones, so you may have to trade off a bit. But again, there are lots of recipes in the book for different shakes and things that you can make. So once you've got your isoflavones back into your body, and you're fooling your brain into thinking you've got normal circulating estrogen, it helps your memory so that you can remember what you went into the room for, and you haven't got your glasses on your head and you're looking for them. Or your libido comes back, so you do feel switched on again and more playful and sexy, and intercourse can become comfortable if it's been uncomfortable, and you have more confidence and start liking yourself more. Your self-esteem comes back. So talking about future-proofing your health, as I said, again, but it's worth repeating, is that you are really the architect of your journey as you go through this phase in your life into your more mature years. And it's really, the onus is on you to make the decision to keep yourself in good shape. And obviously you can only do that if you've got good, sound information that's science-based. So estrogen affects so many things in our body. So when it switches off at the time of menopause, it's going to affect our brain, our skin and our hair, our heart and our arteries, our breasts, our bones, and the uterus and endometrium, the lining of the uterus, and our vagina. So that can get really thin. Sometimes women say that they, one of my patients described her vagina as a burning fireball. It bled and she couldn't sit down comfortably. It was so painful. So she couldn't even contemplate having a physical relationship with her husband. 3 months later, she was back to having a loving relationship. And she was so blown away because she'd been on HRT for 10 years and she put weight on and felt terrible. After going through the program, she felt so brilliant. She actually retrained and became a healer and went on to do tons of wonderful work for other people. Osteoporosis, as I mentioned earlier, your bone mass reaches its peak at the age of 35. Not many people realize that. And we then start to lose bone. And you can see from that little picture there that you start to get gaps in your bone and they become much more brittle. Now, osteoporosis is known as a silent killer. It is harmful, and some good percentage of people that fracture their hip don't recover. And it can be very painful. So it can be prevented too. So if you learn how to meet your needs, you can grow new bone. So you can go back to that scenario where you are making as much bone as you're losing each year, and that keeps your bones strong. If you've already got osteoporosis, you can reverse it. And if you've got osteopenia, which is the precursor to osteoporosis, you can reverse that too. It takes time. Again, it's not magic. It takes a few years. But after 5 or 6 years, you should be able to reverse osteoporosis and get back to having a normal bone mass. And it's just really important to know that you can do that. Another thing that's going on under the radar is that when we're no longer protected from estrogen, our cholesterol levels often rise, and many of us end up on statins. That you don't need to do that if you're consuming foods that are going to be rich in naturally occurring estrogen, and plenty of other foods. Even simple walnuts will drive your cholesterol down. There's lots of ways to do that naturally so that you don't have to be saddled with a life full of drugs. And the isoflavones have got these naturally occurring estrogen. They have a really positive effect on all these different departments. So from our brain to our heart and our arteries, keeping them more youthful, protecting our bone, our vaginal health, and the uterus, not that we need that anymore once we get to a certain age, but keeping our breasts in good shape and protecting us as well. It has a cancer protecting effect so that we are less predisposed to breast cancer. And if you have been having these senior moments and wondering what on earth is going on because you don't remember your best friend's name or what you went into a room for, then you can feel that you're there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You're going to get back to having a decent memory again. And that just reminds me of one more story of someone told me about a woman who was in America in one of these big car parks, and she came out of the supermarket and went to get in her car and saw these 3 guys putting the key in the door and getting into her car. And she came running over to them, pulled her gun out of what they call her purse, pointed it at them and said, "Get away from my car." And it actually turned out it wasn't her car at all, it was theirs. So that was the maddest senior moment I've ever heard. But people often drive off with their handbag on top of the car, or, you know, they've got their glasses on their head, or they're looking for their phone and it's in their hand, or all sorts of crazy things, just because their brain's not working very well. So it can be reversed. As we grow older, we have got less oxygen going through to our brain, but if we exercise, and that has a really positive effect on us anyway, because it helps not just to provide oxygen to our brain and keep the brain cells healthy, but it also speeds up our metabolism. So if we've been putting weight on around the middle, we can shed that as well. And very often people lose between 7 and 14 pounds without dieting in the first 6 weeks of my program. It's just so important to understand that having a nutrient-dense diet and a phytoestrogen-rich diet is going to put you back into a much better place and will just keep you sharp and active at your best, and so that you haven't got a tension in your body. So at the beginning, Gina was saying about doing the breathing so that we could get out of our head and into our heart. Well, what I find is women get out of their body and they're not obsessed with these awful symptoms that are overwhelming. And instead, they've got all their lovely attention units freed up to do the wonderful work that we're meant to be doing in the world. And so I feel, in a sense, that this program helps people to get back to the starting gate, as it were, and then they can decide what to put on their blank canvas and what to do and how to do it in the world, whether it's inside the workplace, outside the workplace, whatever they want to do. And they're not having to be restrained by bodily issues. So that's the end of the main part. I'm, as I said, very happy to answer questions. I have got a website you can go to. I do have a free Midlife Refuel Club. We have live sessions every week, different subjects and sometimes guest speakers. You're welcome to come to those. And I have a Midlife Switch Facebook group as well. You will find me on Instagram at Maryon Stewart Menopause, and we have a weekly newsletter as well. So lots of things. And I also do, obviously, there's my new book, and that's Manage Your Menopause Naturally. And I have been doing one-to-one consultations for more years than I care to remember. These days, they're all virtual and have been for quite a number of years. So this isn't new for me. And we've got our 6-week natural menopause course as well, which is suitable for women post-menopause because it's the same sort of program and it operates from your phone. So you have all the course materials. So anybody wants any more information, you're very welcome to email me. So I think that is the end of my slides. Let's see if I can stop showing my screen.
Great, Maryon. Wonderful. Okay. Okay, so that's wonderful. I love the name of your weekly newsletter. Was it Hot Flash?
Yes.
Hot Press. That's great. So there are a number of questions coming in, and I know that you were going to suggest, looking at the time, people go and have a chat. Do you want to answer a few questions, and then people can go into the chat and maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes talking about the impact of what you said and whether there's changes that people want to make, then come back with some more questions. What are you thinking?
Whichever works best for you guys. I don't mind.
Okay, well, in terms of questions, and I would have these questions too. Kathy's asking about what supplements to take. And I just want to, you mentioned a little bit there about absorption, because, you know, I bought supplements and then I haven't been terribly motivated to take them, or I've taken them and I've not felt anything. So what supplements to take is a question, and then things to do that might increase absorption, or just take them.
Yes. Okay. So increasing absorption, depending on what you're taking, but certainly decreasing absorption will, if you're, as I said, taking the tannins and phytates, are going to lock onto the nutrients in the short term. And in terms of which supplements, it's quite a hard question to answer because there are so many symptoms. And I tend to recommend the supplements that have been through clinical trials. In the book, in chapter 4, I mention them all by name and the doses. And what I try and do in the book, it's a bit like the manual for my course. I try and allow people to self-select their program, so that there are charts at the end of the book that they can actually write down the recommendations that they need to follow. Everyone will need to take a good strong multivitamin and mineral. And we use Fema 45 Plus in the UK and Gynovite Plus in the US. And then I tend to recommend things like Promensal, which is a red clover supplement, which is standardized and been through clinical trials. And then there are lots of other products, again, that have been through clinical trials. Some of them you can take together, some of them you can't. It depends if you're taking medication, which ones might work for you. But because the research shows that so many of the supplements that you see in pretty packets on the shelves do not contain what they say on the label, I recommend specific supplements. And I'll give you an example. We were asked to recommend a supplement once that contained supposedly 39 milligrams of isoflavones per pill. And when an independent analysis showed that it only contained 1 milligram. And I just felt so angry, which is why I recommend particular brands that have been through trials, not only to show that they're standardized and contain what they say on the label, but also that they're not going to cause you any harm. Right. Because if you're mucking with your hormones, you know, you don't want an overgrowth. We know that there are some downsides to HRT in terms of breast tissue and adverse effects on other bits of us. So we want to make sure that whatever we're doing is safe. So that's why and they're not my supplements, they're just supplements that have been through clinical trials. So I put the research together so people can access the information.
Just expansion on the supplements, because there, you know, yes, there are, somebody was talking about it, calcium, the main one for osteoporosis. It isn't just there are 6 supplements to take and that's it, because everybody's different. Yes. Do you advise, and so I really think that your book has got a lot of detail, so you know it bears this is just an introduction, isn't it, to the framework of the subject,
and also just to manage everyone's expectations. I describe my program as a pie, in that it's got all these segments in it that you need to have a taste of each one. There isn't a magic pill, so you can't just think I'll take that and I'll be fine. And we're all different. So it is finding out what's going to work for you, and depending on which stage you're at as well. And that may change. So if you're perimenopausal, for example, or even menopausal, then what you need now may be slightly different to what you need in the longer term. And so you're going to need to have that information, either to get it from something like my book, or to get some help so that you have a personal program written for you according to your symptoms. So that's, yeah.
And is there a place that somebody could get a test? Because it seems to me that we're micromanaging nutrients as well as eating this food. With the potential of supplements, we're micromanaging the kind of nutrients we need. You mentioned dementia in the brain. The more we learn about that, the more we learn what the brain needs. Is there a test that somebody could get where they get their nutrient levels, get a baseline, and then they're on your program, or they're doing a nutritional for a number of weeks and go back to the test? Otherwise, how do we know what we really need and whether it's going to have an effect on us?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, yes, the answer is there are tests. There's a lab in London called BioLab, but you have to get referred to that does nutritional tests. And then there are external labs where you can send samples off. But a lot of those tests, for example, the BioLab ones are £350. and the actual test, Genova diagnostics and that kind of thing, they're even more than that. And so unless someone has got an unusual problem or a very complicated medical history, I don't usually recommend that they have the test. We usually, because we can tell from looking at someone and from their medical history and from their symptoms what's likely to be lacking, we usually go down the road of implementing the obvious to start with, and then if that doesn't work going down the line, then to resort to tests and so on. So I think you can save money on tests, because I think that, the supplements are an investment as well, and that's ongoing, and certainly until you get onto safe ground, and then you can cut back on those. And again, that's a suck it and see operation to see what you need to take in the longer term to just keep yourself in good shape.
You mentioned about soy, and I was thinking this, and I saw somebody asked a question about that somewhere along the line, and big enthusiast for soy and tofu. I saw a lot about soy not being great, and I pulled away from soy. So the question is, what is there about soy that has been put out to say it's not good? Because you made a lot of recommendations for having soy and tofu. So what's the story with that?
So I think the story started originally as a legal case between the soy industry and the dairy industry. I think there's a big story about that going back many years. And there've been all sorts of bad press on soy, but the research, and I'm very stringent about this, I'm in touch with leading professors in this area, and I'm always getting updates. I've got all the research, and in the book I've woven the research into the chapters in really ordinary speak, as it were, but I've also got the medical references at the back of the book, which shows that soy is perfectly safe, it's cancer protective, and even if you've had breast cancer, you can take soy to help you prepare yourself and prevent another event. And if you think about it, the Asian communities have been consuming soy for decades or centuries, and they have half the incidence of estrogen-dependent cancer, dementia, osteoporosis, and heart disease, and men don't grow breasts. So I think that, and anybody, and obviously I'm asked this question every single week of my working life, so we have all the references that I'm very happy, can share if anyone wants to get the book, or we can share the references anyway.
That's great. Good, you mentioned about the conflict. There was a similar conflict between coconut oil, because when I did my macrobiotic food training, it's like coconut oil was a known. Everybody said coconut oil was really bad for you. And then suddenly it's everywhere as the wonder food. And that came from negative press from one of the oil industries in America in the 60s, putting out the negative propaganda. So you're kind of alluding to so this is the basis then, that there's a lot of negative stories going out there from another industry. Yeah. Because everything you were saying is so soy laden, so that is good news. Let me pick out one more question, and then we'll put people into groups. People were asking about drinking milk, which I think is dairy milk. Is that harmful? And another one was coffee, white wine was flagged up as things on the negative side that, robbers of nutrients.
Okay, so coffee will act as a stimulant, and if you're anxious, not sleeping very well, or you've got hot flushes, then that's going to make that worse. Dairy milk you can have is fine if it agrees with you, but obviously you're going to be trying to have soy milk as well, so you're probably going to have less dairy. And what was the other thing you said?
White wine.
White wine. White wine. Well, if you're going to drink wine, depending on if you have hot flushes, if you have hot flushes, then usually I cut people down to a couple of glasses of alcohol a week, and white wine and spirits are best. I would choose those over and above red wine while you're going through this and trying to have your refuel. So you're not likely to have the same kind of effect because you haven't got tannin in white wine.
Okay. So should we give a few minutes for people to get into groups and have a chat with each other? Let me quickly see how many people we've got, and maybe give gallery, and then. Okay, is everybody all right? All right. I'm going to put you in groups of 3, and you can talk about. Where's Maryon gone? I lost Maryon. We say they should talk about what they heard from you and whether they feel they're working on things, or whether they're going to come away from this with a desire for change and what that change might be. So that gives 10 minutes for people to be in groups of 3. I'm going to do that. Breakout rooms. How many people are we all together? 19, 6 rooms. 6 rooms. Okay, everybody, you've got 10 minutes and then you'll get a 1-minute warning and I'll bring everybody back and then we'll do final questions with Maryon. Open all rooms. People are joining rooms. And it's 1956. Okay, everybody's going. Great. Debbie's going, and then you're here with me. Okay. Yeah. Excuse me a second while I put the recording on pause. No, I don't want to. I want to pause the recording. Pause.
No, you're recording again now. You had it.
Right, we've started recording again. Well, welcome back, everybody, from your breakout rooms. We've got a final 10 minutes to ask any questions that maybe have come from your conversations. And I'm going to flag up a question for Maryon that was there from before, which was somebody talked about having their ovaries removed. I don't know whether that's more than one person, but ovaries removed age. Oh no, were removed 18 months ago, not at age 18. Okay, that's a big difference. Age 60 now, so recent removal of ovaries. So there's a comment there.
Well, I think when you get to your 60s, your ovaries probably not really working anyway. So it's irrelevant because you'd still have empty estrogen receptor sites. And so you'd still need to fill it with Mother Nature's estrogen to fool your brain to thinking you've got circulating estrogen again. So I think that, I don't really think that's a big deal. Be a bigger deal if it was 40 years earlier, then because there's some thought, you know, you may be more predisposed to osteoporosis, but at age 60, I don't think that's an issue, to be honest.
Okay. Any questions come from your discussion about insights you might have or areas that you're going to work on? Any clarifications or anybody want to share anything? There's not that many of us. I can always flag you up for a second to speak or pop your question in here.
Can I just ask if you're taking supplements, where's the best place to find out if various supplements interfere with medication that you take? Is it just a Google search or is there a good site that you can check?
I don't know of a good site that you can check except to look at individual. So for example, if you're taking an antidepressant and you want to take, let's say, an adaptogenic herb, you'd have to put the name of the antidepressant in the search and see if there's any contraindications to taking the supplement with it. What we do when we tailor make the programs is we tailor make the supplement program as well according to whether someone's taking medication, and so things don't conflict. But if you want to do it by yourself, then you're just going to have to do it, I'd say do it one by one to make sure it doesn't conflict with something you're taking.
And just to ask again, this program that you have, where is there a link for it that we could have in here if people want to find out more? Or
they can go, if they just go to my website, I can give you a link which you can send out, but it's probably better if anybody is interested in having some help, if they just email me, just maryon@maryonstewart.com, and then I will have a conversation with you and just decide, is the 6-week course the best thing for you to do? Would you be better off to just have a one-to-one consultation? And we can sort of take it from there rather than just going to sign up somewhere. But you'll find details. If you go onto my website, just maryonstewart.com, and look at the top, it says solutions. And then you go to the 6-week solution. You'll see all about the 6-week course, and it talks about the one-to-ones and all the different services there.
Oh, fantastic. So what you basically shared from today is that really from mid-30s, if you're a Western woman, non-Asian, and you don't have a more Asian diet, you really have to look at eating more specifically targeted food. You have to be consciously aiming for certain foods and really thinking about supplements rather than just think, I exercise, I don't eat too much fat or whatever, and I'll be okay. You know, we really have to be mindful and think about it, don't we? Be conscious.
Yeah. And also, I think, nurture ourselves, because depending on the stage that you're at. So, for example, I described my program as a pie, if you remember. So one of the slices is relaxation or meditation. And the research shows that if you do 20 to 30 minutes of formal relaxation a day, you can reduce the hot flushes by 50 to 60%. So that's not insignificant. And these days, when COVID's in the air and we've got elevated cortisol levels making us feel really stressed, that also helps to rewire our brain and bring down our cortisol levels. So that's another whole subject of how to bring down elevated cortisol, but that's one of the ways of doing it. And so it's another thing that we can do for ourselves over time, and a false economy not to do it, really, because if you're feeling tired as the day goes on and then you end up falling asleep on the sofa in the evening because you've got no energy left, if you can find some time during the day to do your relaxation or meditation, you're going to bit like plugging your phone into the mains. You're going to go from red to green, and you'll get some more quality hours out of the day. So that's another thing, as well as doing some exercise. It's just finding what works for you, depending on your fitness level and your lifestyle and your pace of life, and finding that program that's going to be sustaining and enjoyable, because this is not like a weight loss diet that you go on for a few weeks and then hop off it again. We're looking at doing something ideally that's going to be something you'd be happy with for the most part for the rest of your life. I mean, cutting out foods is only the short term while you're having your refuel, but finding an enjoyable way of consuming these foods with naturally occurring estrogen and finding other nutrient dense foods to keep nourishing yourself is going to be important for the rest of your life.
It's interesting you say about reducing the hot flashes. I can remember I would be doing my makeup and I literally had a drip coming off my chin, and it was so up to, I had to wear minimum clothes to do my makeup. I gave up alcohol. Gone. You know, just that for me, that was the thing that just, I didn't have a face literally dripping with sweat. So we all have different ways of managing. I'm not, yeah. And I haven't had any alcohol since. We all have different ways of managing it, but yeah, you definitely can do things that have an effect.
You may find that you can go back to having small amounts of alcohol now without having that, depending on what else you're doing. But certainly, when I went through my menopause, I couldn't even sniff wine and it made me hot. But now I'm quite happy to enjoy wine without getting hot. And same goes for chocolate. You know, it doesn't, if you enjoy chocolate, it's in the long term, it's fine. It's just the short term that there are maybe some sacrifices to be made along the way, just while you're having the refuel.
Yeah. Is there any final question here? Everyone with sulfites is good, somebody's saying. Any final question for Maryon? I think that you've given us a great overview and a rallying call, actually, for really taking care of ourselves if we're not doing that already. And I'm sure everybody is to a degree. And I think possibly what we've got from here is finessing things and learning where to put more importance on things.
Can I maybe just ask people to raise your hand if you just learned something today that you can do to make things better for yourself? As there's just, you know, even if it's just one thing that you didn't know about before. So most of you have got your hands up. So that's, yeah, so that's really good. So I think that's it. And what we're trying to do at the moment is we're taking this program into corporations, because there was a survey done on doctors and gynecologists in 2019, a Mayo Clinic survey showing that only 7% of doctors felt adequately educated to help women going through menopause, which I thought was absolutely appalling. So now we're taking this program into corporations so that we can help women to reclaim their well-being and obviously become much more productive. And therefore it's going to have a good effect on the economy. So we're hoping this year that we're going to demonstrate the economic model. We've partnered with Virgin Care and Loughborough University to do that, and I'm looking forward to that and showing the world that there's another way.
Excellent, wonderful, thank you. Well, Maryon, thank you so much. That is great. It's given people food for thought, and there's more information if for those who want it. They know that you've got lots of resources on your website. So we should say, you know, thank you.
My pleasure, really, my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
That's really beautiful.
Okay.
And we have another Conscious Cafe event on Monday. It's Monday night, isn't it, Judy? Judy is just, yeah, we have Nick Haynes coming back. He was with us last spring, and he's talking about, we've just entered the new year with Chinese New Year, and he's going to talk about insights for what those cycles of time mean and what the year of the ox brings versus what we've just been through was the year of the rat. So what he said last year for what the year of the rat would be was really interesting. That definitely came about, very useful. So that's what we have on Monday night. And then consciouscafe.org on the events page, there are other events coming up. I think Malcolm Stern's doing something, isn't he, Judy?
Yes, in March, we've got Louis Parsons, and we're going to have a painting class together. So you don't need any skills or experience. You just come along on this Saturday morning, and we're all going to create something wonderful and share it. And you're going to love Louis because he is an amazing guy. He's an artist. And we've got Malcolm Stern, who's offering a 3-part course which will help you improve your relationships. And even if your relationships are fine, I always learn something when I'm in the presence of Malcolm Stern. We have got a recording of a previous event with him, and he used to run alternatives, and I always recommend him to people. He's a great person to learn from. And at the end of March, we have got Jessica Adams, who is one of our most popular presenters, and she'll be telling us what astrology has in store for us. And she's done this twice before for us, once last August and once in November. And so much of what she said has come true that it is quite extraordinary. So we have got an amazing program at the moment, and recommend all of these people to you. And we also have our regular discussions, and hi to people who I've seen regularly in our discussions, because it's lovely to see you again. So thank you, Gina. And Maryon, your presentation has been amazing.
Thank you.
At Conscious Cafe, we so appreciate how supportive you always are. And tonight was the most wonderful opportunity to learn from your vast and very up-to-date knowledge. And I think all of us are leaving tonight having learned something new that we can immediately put into practice. So how good is that?
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Judy.
Yes.
Okay.
We've got the roadmap now, haven't we?
Oh, and I'll send the link as well to the nutritional download, so you can have that too. I'll send you that, Gina.